Hi everyone, how are you doing? Welcome. Super excited to be here. I see we've already got one person also chiming in from Knoxville, which is where I am. And it's a gorgeous summer day here. Perfect day to be inside drawing too, though, if you're not out at the pool. So I will just reintroduce myself for those of you who maybe haven't taken a class with me yet or joined me on a live draw. My name is Tiffany S. DaVanzo, and I am a medical illustrator, which, if I get out of the way, you can see kind of here in the background. We're in my office. I illustrate medical textbooks and surgical textbooks and journal articles when surgeons and physicians are developing new techniques. So there's a bookcase full of some of the stuff I've worked on behind me, and I'm really passionate about teaching anatomy and kind of combining anatomy with art and helping artists really kind of get just a little bit of anatomical background to kind of take their art to the next level. So that's kind of what we're going to do today. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my new class that just came out and maybe some of my older classes as well, in case any of you are interested in learning just a little bit about anatomy to add to your portrait. So let me see, I've got the chat pulled up. Let's see where everybody's coming from. Like I said, I'm in Tennessee, good old United States, beautiful day. We've got, from Maine, awesome. Betty, Saskatoon, where's Saskatoon? That sounds very Canadian. Is it Canada? And Jordan down in Miami, Oregon. Oh yes, all the smoke out there. So, does this skeleton have a name? Yes, this is Henry. Henry is my go-to guy. He's not real. He's just a model. He's plastic, and he's about 3/4 life size, so just a tiny bit under real size. So he'd be a little bit taller in real life, but he's really handy. I use him all the time. Sadly for him, I usually take his head off because I use the skull the most, but really handy for a medical illustrator to have. Okay, we see Jennifer from Oakland. And Hawaii, aloha from Herb from Hawaii. My aunt lives in Hawaii on the Big Island. And we've got Renee from Memphis and from London. I haven't been there. I will be there. I will make it there sometime. Adirondacks, Brisbane. Wonderful. Wonderful. All right, well, we've got folks tuning in from around the world, which is so exciting for me. I tell you what, since finding Sktchy a couple of years ago, it's just been so amazing to connect with all these artists and get to know you all kind of remotely. So I love it. I love seeing everybody from every place. So, well, I'm going to just kind of slowly start into the drawing here as people are kind of jumping on. And if you have any questions, just throw them in the chat and I'll see if I can find them here and answer them. We're going to draw, this is Alex. Let me switch. I'm going to switch off my view, switch back to the other one. All right. So this is Alex, and Alex is Laura's husband, and she put his photo up on Sktchy and agreed to let us draw him. The reason I chose him is it's fantastic when you're starting out learning anatomy to draw somebody who's got pretty obvious muscles, and he certainly does. So thank you, Alex, for lending us your biceps for today's drawing. It's going to be a great help. You can work how you want. If you want me to, let me know. I can take the image down. I usually like to have it just printed on paper really close to me because I like to move it around as I'm drawing. So I'll probably just keep him over there as I'm drawing. Okay. All right, New York City too. Another Miami. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to do today, and feel free to go ahead and start on your sketch, is I'm just going to talk about some of the muscles. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the photo on here. And this is something that we do in my new class. So my new Sktchy class is called Drawing Anatomy of the Human Body. And what differentiates it from my past classes is that we're really focusing on the rest of the body, where in the past we've talked about the face, we're moving down, we're going to have a whole lesson on the neck, there's an arms lesson, there's a torso lesson, and there's a legs lesson as well. So talk about the muscle groups and kind of how to identify them, and then we put that into practice by doing portraits. So one of the things we do is go ahead and take the photo and just kind of look and see what muscles we can identify. So I've gone ahead and just, let me let my cat out. Just 1 second. Come here. You want out? Come on. Come on. I have a good cat and a bad cat, and one is locked out and one is in. So I've gone ahead and just identified and kind of highlighted the areas where I can see obvious muscles and muscle groups. And you're welcome to do this, or you're welcome to just kind of start on your sketch. One of the things that's a bit unique about my anatomy classes is they're not media specific. So I might use Procreate, I might use graphite, but really because we're learning anatomy, I just want you to be as comfortable as you can while you're drawing. So just use whatever technique works for you is kind of my motto. So if we look, we can see this bulge here on his shoulders. That's the deltoid. And for any of you who work out, these are going to be really familiar muscle names. And then of course we can see his biceps here. Now I wish I had enough time to get into veins and stuff, because look at this, wow. And then on the back of your arms, back here, we have, of course, the triceps. And there is another muscle that's a little bit deep that you can kind of see sometimes. That's the brachialis right here. And then the forearms are really complex because, let's see, you know, when you flip your arm, they twist. So you have a muscle that runs along the side by your thumb, but when you twist, it twists over. And that's the brachioradialis. And then we have the extensor carpi radialis longus here. And then we have these extensors. So I'm just going to group them all together because those are the ones that run on top of your arm. And then of course we have pectoralis major here. You can kind of see under his t-shirt. And then you can see a little bit of, it's in shadow here, the Latissimus Dorsi. I didn't label that guy. This one, these are my favorite. I'm going to turn it off, the labels off for a second so you can see them right here. So these you might think are ribs, and a lot of people do think, wow, it's got really bulky ribs. This is a muscle that runs along the ribs called the serratus anterior, and then it connects to the external oblique, and it's so cool. And this is where I get really kind of nerdy in my anatomy classes because I get excited about things like this. But they kind of join together like this. So they create this really cool basket weave effect. So those are the major muscles. And then of course under his shirt, if we could see it, I'm sure we could definitely identify his rectus abdominis muscles really well, or the 6-pack or 8-pack, what have you. So, and if I turn off the photo, you can kind of see at the end of all that, you've got this kind of rough muscle rendering. So let's start drawing. So I've just got something to kind of get me going here, a rough sketch. I knew I was going to be focusing on the body a lot, so I wanted to just add a little bit of detail to the head to get me started so that I could really focus my attention on his body. And so I am going to work in Procreate today. But I want to use a technique that will kind of translate easy for those of you who might be working in pen or graphite or ink. So I'm going to kind of use a graphite style. And I think I'm just going to start with a 6B pencil. This is just under Sktchy 6B. And what I've done is I've made a copy of it, and I've also made it big. I've just increased the size. So I've got two here that I'll probably go back and forth with between 6B pencil and 6B big, which is just a pencil that I've enlarged a bit. Okay, so how I started was just basically the same way I always start a sketch. I always start with the head. You'll notice in the photo his head is cut off. That's not going to stop me. I will draw the whole head. I can't do it, which is another great thing about anatomy. When you have a little bit of that background, you're able to then fill in the pieces. So after this, I'll go on Sktchy and I'll look up some more photos of him so I get his hairstyle right and get it a little more accurate. But I've just added a little top of his head there. So I started with the head, and then I looked for the major shapes. So his shoulders are so broad and his waist is so narrow. So I've just kind of got a triangle shape here. And then I've just done some really kind of rough line work and sketching in of his arm. So what shall we start with? Let's go ahead and start in the center and work out. So let's start with his torso. I will just make sure I'm on the right layer. I'm going to start a new layer because I've got this sketch kind of light and I'll want to work a little bit darker. I'm just going to indicate where I think his shirt is, just to kind of block that area off for me. Did you guys hear that? Those were my cats. They made an appearance, and there's always got to be some kind of interruption, so. Okay, so I'm just blocking off his shirt. Now I can move over here and start working on the muscles. All right, so let's start with the pectoralis major here. Then over to the deltoid. So, the thing about anatomy too is we've all got it. You cannot see my muscles the way you can see Alex's, but they are there. So studying about it just kind of, I think it makes us appreciate our own bodies. Just how amazing they really are. We're this really complex machine that we don't even think about as we go on our day-to-day lives. So this is going to be a tricky area because his muscles are flexed. They are thicker and fuller and more bunched up as opposed to being, stretched out and relaxed. And we do draw them more relaxed in my new class because we're drawing them in anatomical position. And anatomical position is just face forward, palms up, standing position. Just, I suppose, the easiest way to learn anatomy, but you have to learn it that way so that you can put it into practice in dynamic poses. And if I don't know if any of you took Bodies in Motion recently, so then you'd be really familiar about just how dynamic the human figure can be. So I'm looking at shapes, I'm thinking about the underlying anatomy, but art is what it is, and there's always plenty of shapes to hint out. So I try to take a really relaxed kind of approach to anatomy. I am not worried about anyone who's taking a class with me learning a precise name or pronouncing it right. I don't pronounce them right half of the time. It's more just being comfortable with it so that you can identify the shapes, and then that becomes helpful. I see. I didn't know, Jennifer, that you were an RN. Worked many years. Yeah, I find a lot of people who've worked in the medical field enjoy being able to combine a little anatomy with their art because it's familiar and it just helps them see things in a different way. And I think a lot of medical professionals as well really benefit from having some art background, because then they can see the body, or especially in a field like plastic surgery or something, get a new appreciation for aesthetics. And so the top of the hand, I'm just going to block in kind of as a square shape. Lost my pencil. I always work loose to tight. There's always a long, awkward stage. Kind of like life. I suppose we all have a long, awkward stage. So his elbows are cut off in this picture, and that's just one of those other reasons a little bit of anatomy is helpful, because you can use your gut to kind of determine where you think that elbow should fall. And in my classes, I always tell people to keep a mirror handy as well. I'm quite fond of telling people to use themselves as their own model, and it's the best way to learn. Another thing I warn about in my classes is it's very easy for me to stop talking for a minute or two. There's something tricky about anatomy. and art, and that to me, I think you're using both sides of your brain. And if you go too far, too right brained, and you're thinking, creatively about the color and the tone and all of these wonderful things that artists think about, and then you switch to something very technical like where exactly does that muscle end, etc., etc. Your brain likes to take a little pause and switch over, I think. Mine does, at least. The thing I like about working either one-to-one, either with my photo open on half of the screen and over, is that I can adjust my drawing and then use it to check myself. So I'm just going to see if I like how everything's falling. How's everybody doing? Everybody getting some muscles in? Be interested to hear if you all think it is harder or easier to draw somebody super fit, or if it's a challenge to expand to the whole body after you've been very used to drawing facial portraits and just kind of focusing on the face. So it can be hard for me to switch gears. I'm gonna just zoom in here for a second. And yeah, sorry. Hold on, everybody. Just want to work on his face for a second. Just give it a little more detail so it doesn't fall too far behind. He's got some really neat lighting too that's making it very kind of dramatic and almost I don't know, it's kind of a tough, gritty kind of picture. So I'll have some fun later with maybe some other brushes to see what I can do with that. In my new class, I think I used Procreate on 2 of the portraits and graphite on the other 2. So a little something for everybody. And if I'm using Procreate, I always try to just kind of stick to the basic brushes just to, you don't need to add learning a new program in if you're not familiar with Procreate. If you're trying to learn anatomy, anatomy is enough by itself. So I try to make it really simple. My professional work, I work all exclusively digitally. in Photoshop and Illustrator. So I'm starting to introduce Procreate into my workflow to see if I can make it work. So that's kind of exciting for me. But I have to do a lot of revisions in my work. You'll draw surgery and they'll say, oh, we don't do it that way anymore, so we need to change this, or so I need to be able to change things easily, and so working digitally is super helpful for that. This week, I think I'm working on some illustrations for a plastic surgery journal. So that will have a little bit, that will be mostly anatomy. And then some illustrations of the venous system and the nervous system of the whole body. So that's going to be a lot for a company that makes medical devices that are in the IV field. So the venous anatomy is really important. And then I'm working on a dentistry book, so that will be a lot of facial nerves and stuff like that. So, and then probably have to draw a couple cells in there as well. So all over the place. I think that's why I enjoy portraiture so much, just being able to come back and draw the human face and the emotions and expressions. So I see a lot of familiar names on the chat here. So most of you all are probably pretty familiar with the classes I already have out, but if you're not, check them out. I'm sure Sktchy has a link down there in the comments, so you can go over to Sktchy Art School. But I love being involved with the 30 Faces 30 Days, so I've done a couple of those. And then my original anatomy class was combined with a new one, and it's human drawing anatomy, facial anatomy. And so that's a really detailed deep dive into kind of the anatomy of the face. And then I have a drawing emotion class as well, which is fun, because we still talk a little bit about anatomy in that, but we talk specifically about how your the muscles of your face move and contort to help you smile and frown, and I think we do angry, surprised, happy, so that's a fun one too, if you like drawing expressive faces. There's lots of great expressive faces as reference over on the Sktchy app. So Anatomy for the Artist by Sarah Simblett. I will look for that one. I don't think that's one I have. And when I switch back at the end here, I will show you a couple of the ones that I use a lot in case anybody's interested. But I will definitely look at that one, because I love adding to my collection. You can never have too many anatomy books or too many art books. We can see just a little bit here, that jaw muscle, that masseter is tense. And the light is hitting it, so just make a little indication of that. And so if you've taken any of my classes before, you know how I feel about the ear. I love it. I think it's one of the most fun parts of the human body to draw. So I'm just gonna give it a second's worth of love and then get back to the body. I think the ear is just one of those things that you forget about. You know, you wait till the end, and then you're like, this is a great portrait, I love it. Something's really weird, something's off, and sure enough, you haven't spent very much time on the ear. So all right. I think I've made him look a little sterner than he is, but that gets me a good start. I'm going to go ahead and reduce that in size. Here we go. Okay, so I think I want to experiment a little bit with where I want to take this and how I want to do the shading. So I'm going to just give myself another layer, put it underneath the sketch, and maybe I'll name it Shadow. And I'm going to pick, let's see where we're in, Vintage. So this is a brush called Wedge Tail that I discovered while I was working on one of the portraits for the class. And it's kind of, it has a really soft, almost charcoal-y type of feeling. And I'm just going to get, I think I'm going to get like a dark rust color. Okay. Let's see what happens. And again, I'm working on the shadow layer, so it's underneath my sketch. So if I mess up, I'm just gonna erase it. It's not gonna mess up my sketch here. I don't know if you can see what this brush does. So it comes off like that, but then it tends to layer itself, and then it also has this weird push and pull, so it's fun. It's a little grungy, so it seemed like maybe it would be a tough, rough choice for bodybuilding pick. I'm going to look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. If we have a lot of people who are drawing, I tend to be a watch the lesson, draw later type of person, but sometimes I'm able to draw along. I'm losing a little bit of the details of my sketch, which was kind of rough to begin with, so I might reduce the opacity of this, or else I'll go back and let's do this. I'm going to change my sketch from normal to multiply, and that will automatically just let it be darker. So just a big thanks to Alex and Laura for putting his photo up, because it's so great to have access to great full figure references or partial figure. Another way I tend to like to work is I like to do a lot of erasing out. Like to start from a middle tone ground. I'm not today. I'm starting from white, but I really like the feeling of starting in the middle and pushing it both ways. All right. Okay. I'm curious about his tattoos. I might need to see those up close. I think I'm going to go now and just kind of darken up a few of my lines on top. I'm going to use a brush called Dry Ink, and it's under inking. And I'm going to go back to kind of my dark. It wasn't exactly a black. It was kind of a dark bluish gray. I'm going to go back to my top sketch and kind of just refine those. Let's see. The brush that I was using before was called Wedge Tail, and it's under Vintage, which has got a lot of really funky brushes, and this one was just something, yeah, it felt very chalky, charcoaly something, but it's a neat one. And then I'm going to switch to Dry Ink, and then I'm just going back to my top sketch because I feel like I kind of lost a little bit of my definition, and I want to go back in here and sharpen that up. Negative space is a big help as well. Just encourage you to keep an eye out for that when you're refining things. So in my class, we kind of talk a lot more about what the muscles do or where they kind of start, but it is definitely just scratching the surface, I guess. You could spend hours and hours and hours learning the details of anatomy. So it's just more of an intro to get yourself familiar. No experience necessary. So we do not talk about every muscle in the body, that's for sure. If you had to guess, how many muscles do you think we have? And I guess I should say people's opinion differ on this, but rough guess. All right, so we have the number I usually end up kind of gravitating back to is about 650 different muscles. So no worries, we will not go over all of them. A lot of them are very tiny and very deep, but superficial muscles, that's kind of what's the most important, the most helpful for artists. No muscles by your elbow, just hard bone. So that's kind of an area to look out for. Something else I like to talk about is feeling your own bony landmarks. So where you can feel your, clavicle or behind your ear. There's a lot of different landmarks that we can feel that can really help guide us when we're drawing. Even if we can't quite make it out in the picture. Something I have to do in my job a lot is change somebody's position or So you're looking at 3 different references and combining them until they seem like they make sense. Okay. I think I'm going a little bit away from that black and white graphite look, but I'm really feeling the need to add some color in here. So I'm going to debate that the next couple minutes. I'm curious too, how many of you talk to yourselves while drawing? Or if you've ever tried to, or turn the camera on. It's very interesting. I feel like I've learned a lot since I've filmed these classes, whether it be a 30 Faces, 30 Days or an anatomy class. When you have to talk through the decisions you're making, it really makes you think about why you're making them. And yeah, it's really interesting. You just, as artists, I think we let ourselves be led by intuition a lot. And, sometimes it works out perfectly, and sometimes it doesn't. But when you have to kind of express it or explain it, it really makes you think. Okay. All right, I'm glad I'm not the only one talking to myself. All right. So I want to go in here and add a little bit more definition to some of these muscles. As cool as that brush was, it kind of oversimplified things a bit. So I think I will go ahead and just mess around and see about adding a little bit of color. I think the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to pick a mid-range tone, and I'm going to go back to my wedge tail, give myself another layer at the bottom and make this really big. Yeah, I haven't quite figured out. There's something about this brush that it lightens itself and darkens itself. It's really interesting. Okay, but now that I've done this, I can add some white. And let's go ahead and throw some dark into his shirt. I'm going to go back to that kind of bluish, blackish color. And I'm just going to put it on its own layer in case I don't like it. Since I've started using Procreate, it's made it a little bit harder for me in my day-to-day job because I'll find myself wanting to do the same kind of technique or effect. And then I realized I don't know how to do that in Photoshop. I don't have that brush. And then I end up spending all this time looking for a similar brush in Photoshop. So I see a eventual transition for me if I can someday to doing more work in Procreate. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go back to that shadow layer, and I'm just going to pick a different, I'm going to pick kind of an orangey tone. We're going to go ahead and just, I'm going to go wild. There's no roadmap to this. I'm not quite sure. I don't know. We'll see if we like that or not. Yeah, it's a fun brush, isn't it? It's just so, it's a little unpredictable, which is good for me because I can be really, I can get caught up in the details, and this forces me to kind of stay loose and kind of grungy. And this is looking really warm, but I like to work kind of in my warms, and then I come back and throw some cools on, cool tones to change it up a bit. So not to worry. It does look very superhero-ish. So I think I'm going to do like a cool purple. I know we're getting close to time. So obviously I'm not going to quite finish this, but you can see where it's going. I think I want that bluer. I love black and white, but I tell you, there's just something fun about color. Okay. Yeah, I think we need to come up with a superhero name for Alex. So I'm going to go ahead and now go above my top sketch and make a new layer. I'm going to put my highlights up here. Just gives me flexibility to change things easier. And then it will kind of go over some of the outlining stuff that I did for the muscles that maybe was a little too dark. I can highlight over that. I am using a pure white right now. I usually tend to pick one with a bit of a little bit of a tint, but because we're going over so much color, I'm not going to worry about that. I use a similar technique in, gosh, which lesson is it? I think it's lesson 5 in the class. Another great Sktchy reference model, Knoll. And it was my first time using this brush, and I guess I'm just really excitable because I got really excited. I was having way too much fun, so I hope you guys do as well. I just think that's the fun thing about art is I don't know if there's much point in doing it if you don't enjoy it. You have to find something that makes you really excited. And for me, there's some little anatomical, quirks and tricks that get me excited. Sometimes it's a new brush in Procreate. Sometimes it's just a graphite stroke that was accidental but fell in exactly the right space and place. So just to get a little bit more saturation in this, I'm going to go and switch back to my dry ink brush. That's a good tip. Gloria's telling me a way that might work. Maybe I can get that in Photoshop. That would be wonderful. Yeah, I just have a few brushes that I just love so much in Procreate. Yeah, so I gotta fix something real quick. Get my eraser here. I think I quite like that deltoid. I felt like needed to be a little bit different. Correct that. It's got this really neat, strong white highlight coming from that side. And then this neat, this really awesome superficial vein here. Ooh. Love it. I'll be drawing veins all next week, but I bet it won't be as much fun as this. Okay. Well, I think we're right about 1 o'clock, and I wanted to show a couple of references, and I'm not going to quite finish, but I am going to work on this for a little bit and take it a little bit farther to give, I've got to give his face at least a little bit more attention, so to match the body. And I want to come down here and add a little detail around his fist. So, but yeah, that's drawing the human body with a little bit of anatomy thrown in there. Let me I'm gonna switch my camera back and I will show you some of the books I like in case anybody's interested in that. And please, if you have any questions, hop in. I'll stay here and answer them for you. So this is a book called Anatomy for Sculptors, and it's, let's see here, it's just muscles. But what I like about it, if I can find an appropriate page, is it kind of, it shows the body in different positions than necessarily just straight. Here's one where it shows, here, the cow. So it shows the leg in different rotational positions and different movements, and it shows photographs as well. So for an artist, it's a really handy book without being too over the top detailed. So that's Anatomy for Sculptors by Oldis Zarins with Sandis Kondrats. Is that what that one is? And then I really like this one. This one by Robert Osti, Basic Human Anatomy. It's another one specifically for artists. Let's see. It breaks it down. I'm trying to find one of the pages where he breaks it down into shapes. But he takes the anatomy and the muscles, but then he will also like break it down into shapes. And I think that's helpful because you don't necessarily need to know, oh, here's one on the hand. It just kind of gives you shapes and forms. And so it's not as detailed as necessarily the ones that maybe I have to use for work, but for an artist, they're really good. And then if anybody is interested in all the nitty gritty, let's see. My two favorite full anatomy books, and this is going to be internal anatomy and everything, would be Netter. And it's going to have more detailed, it'll have nerves and veins, stuff like that. There's a couple of my drawings in there. Or then this one, which is the Theme Atlas of Anatomy, and it's again going to have all the bones and stuff, but this one is specifically just musculoskeletal. But it definitely goes into, a ton of detail. So those are, Theme and Netter are, you really want to take it to the next level, or maybe you're in a health-related field, and then the other two are really great for artists. So, yes, and then there's a couple books in here I think people have suggested that I'm going to go back and check so I can make sure I check them out, because you can never have too many anatomy or art books. So I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you will draw it. I hope you will share it to me if you worked on something while I was drawing. I hope you'll post it over on Sktchy Art School. There is, I think, a link to the Sktchy Live group, and if you post it under there, I will make sure that as soon as I finish up my drawing of Alex, I get him posted there as well, so we can talk. And if you're interested in just adding a little anatomy to your art, check out my classes. I always like to say it's just an extra tool for your toolkit, just like you're interested in learning about watercolor, so you take a class and learn about watercolor, or maybe you study perspective because you'd like to do some urban sketching. Well, anatomy is the same way. You don't have to become an expert. There's no tests in my classes, at least. It's just adding a little bit more to your knowledge base so you can take your art to the next level and enjoy something new. So Anyways, as always, it is my pleasure. Thank you so much. I will see you all out there on Sktchy. And make sure you tag me on Instagram, Slaveball Studios, Sktchy, Tiff Draws Anatomy, and Sktchy Art School. You can find me. And I would love to see your art. So I'll see you soon.